Hello, West Midlands Social Work Teaching Partnership. It's great to be with you again. Did you enjoy the last session? We actually had Dr. Andy Cope with us for a few minutes on the Business Unusual session. Do you remember the things he talked about? I found it fascinating when he says, one thing I can do is take charge of me. I can't change the world. I thought that stuck with me. And he said, if I'm stuck with myself for my 4,000-week journey, what is the best version of me going to be like on that journey? Positive psychology helps me to be a slightly better version of me. So hopefully today you'll enjoy some of the things I'm going to share with you, such as, here we go, more bite-sized brilliance. We've done being brilliant, we've done business as unusual. This one is, yes, mental wealth. Who feels mentally wealthy? It's an interesting phrase, isn't it? Very, very similar to mental health. And mental health is one of the key issues of our times, definitely. During this current pandemic, it's become even more to the fore. So people in the social work industry like yourselves, academics, practitioners, consultants, you're all up to your eyes in, I'm sure, in dealing with the post-pandemic world. So having mental wealth or growing it is a key, absolutely key to being successful. So hopefully today I'm going to share with you a few tips. Some of these have actually been derived from the lovely new book, How to Be a Wellbeing, that Dr. Cope has written. So some of them are condensed from that, and hopefully, yes, will give us the secret of happiness. There are many routes to happiness, as many of you know, I'm sure. So what can I do in 15 to 20 minutes that's going to answer that question? Well, I've just taken a few things from the field of positive psychology and I want to share them with you. Hope you enjoy it, because it is all about our thinking, and I want to brighten the colours of your thinking, because we are definitely a product of our thinking processes. Hopefully that's become really, really key to your way of thinking since you've watched the last couple of sessions. So it's about commitment. Are you prepared to make an investment in your wealth mentally? It's so important. You might have read Jordan Peterson. He's a psychologist. He's got a few YouTube talks. He's a really, really interesting author. He wrote a book called The 12 Rules of Life. One of his rules is treat yourself like someone you're responsible for helping. What an amazing thought that is. So with that kind of thinking in mind, that's how I want to take this journey with you for a few minutes today. So what are we going to do today? Look at some building blocks that can help us to grow our propensity or inclination or feeling of happiness. You can't just switch happiness on. We know that. Happiness is something that is from within, that wells up given a set of thinking processes, circumstances, and other external and internal factors. So are there some building blocks that can assist us on that route to feeling our best selves? Yes, there are. I want to share them with you. And those are, if you like, routes or stepping stones to mental wealth. And that's what I want to do today. 4 routes to mental wealth. There's a lot more than that, I can assure you. But we'll look at 4 today. And of course, as I did before, leave you with some homework. Homework last time, do you remember what it was? How can you shape the new normal in your life? Maybe you remember the other one I asked you to do. Have you learned any lessons from lockdown? So there's some good things there to share with you today, and hopefully you've had things to reflect on if you've already seen the other sessions. So first thing, I learned this many years ago, many of you I'm sure would agree. Is success like that? Is your success and progress in your career and life like that? I doubt it. Probably a bit more like that. I'm sure you'd agree that that is more the reality of being human. Being human means we make mistakes, we have setbacks, we have difficulties, we have dead ends, we have cul-de-sacs that go round in circles in our lives. So it's quite challenging, but we can still be incredibly successful, even though we do tend to carry things around with us through our lives, such as guilt and expectation of others, perhaps too higher expectations of ourselves and others, mistakes of others, and negativity. Is it possible to let go of those things? Not easy. However, while we carry those things, we can acknowledge that they're part of our journey through life. It's okay to visit that village occasionally. Do you get into those days? Do you have some bad days, negative days? Well, can we fundamentally say it's okay not to be okay? It's one of the rules of life. It's reasonable to feel unreasonable. It's fine not to feel fine. The key is not to spend too much time there, to acknowledge those days, be aware of it, and then be determined to have as few of those kind of days as possible through our lives, isn't it? We can go there occasionally, but let's not stay there. I found this fascinating. This pie chart is the building blocks of happiness. In other words, what are the things that contribute to your well-being, your mental wealth? Fascinating. Blue, 50%, half of your happiness propensity and well-being and being upbeat and positive was passed down to you. So who of you feels sometimes that you're turning into your parents? Ooh. And you know, it's an interesting concept that 50% is genetic. In other words, that coupled with circumstances of a meager 10%, in other words, how wealthy you are, how much money you've got, where you live, who you're living with, the job, career you chose, the circumstances around all that, the location of this, the location of that, your material possessions. Oh dear, all of those just a mini bit. The world out there, of course, would have you believe, and me, that our circumstances need to be massively improved with more materialism and things like that. More possessions in life will make you feel great. Well, yes, we do get a spike, but that spike doesn't last long. Interestingly, when we were delivering the Being Brilliant philosophy to schools, well, we still do. Hopefully soon, when they reopen again, we might get a chance to work with some children online. Well, a few years ago, in front of 200 year 10s, in an inner city school, there was a young man, and he stood up after having listened to Andy Cope talk about being a 2%er, choosing your attitude, coming to school with a smile on your face, being determined to be your best self, ditching the mood hoover mentality. He'd been through all of that, and this young lad stood up, and he was one of those alpha males, you know, very tall, very muscular, the one that when he stands up and speaks, everybody else goes quiet. And that's exactly what happened. He stood up, he put his hand up, and he said, "Sir, I've got a confession to make." And Andy was there taking it, and some of us were observing. And this young lad just looked him in the face and he says, "I've got a confession to make. I come from a long line of mood hoovers." He says, "My uncle's one, granddad's one. I even think the dog is a mood hoover as well." He says, "Do you know," he says, "this is where it's going to stop. I've had a light bulb moment, sir. Thank you very much." Isn't it true that, you know, a lot of our background and family life and circumstances can all have a massive part to play on our well-being? But here's the key. Look at that 40% chunk of your happiness well-being pie. Research in positive psychology tells us that actually intentional mental strategies and processes which you personally and I engage in deliberate actions can massively improve our well-being. That's worth remembering. 40%. So is it not the absence of problems, but is it the ability, therefore, to deal with circumstances, to deal with our genetic background, to cope with the situations we're in? How can we do that? Well, let's have a look at our first tip. Our first tip toward mental health is very simply that life is a journey. Life is a story. Your story contains many chapters. And in those chapters, sometimes there are wonderful events like milestones in your life that are fantastic, moments of joy and gladness. There are other chapters with sadness, aren't they? There are other things that happen in life which can really set us back. One of the ways that psychology and the positive psychology looks at is, well, can we acknowledge those things and just in our mental book, if you like, say, well, that negative event in my life is a plot twist. It's just accepting that things have changed. I want to introduce you to a little girl that came, this is her teacher. She came on an Art of Brilliance course about 5 or 6 years ago. She was a young girl of 8 and her name was Izzy. And Izzy suffered from meningitis. And sadly, that led to some amputations of some of the limb for arms and legs. And she suffered a lot. However, She attended the Art of Brilliance. She was fully absorbed in the lessons behind being a 2%, setting huge goals, avoiding mood hoover mentality, and all of those things. As a young girl of 8, just listen to what her teacher says and what she says. You'll pick her up with another little boy as well here.
Teaching, dare I say it. This has been the biggest impact on children in my experience.
Well, I used to be really worrying about the things that I didn't really enjoy doing.
There's no point sitting at the back of the classroom thinking I can't do this, because you're going to have to do everything at some stage. So I think it's better just to get it over with and think the best.
So there's Izzy. What did she say? Just accept it, deal with it. Some of these things I don't feel like doing, but I've got to get on with it. What I found fascinating about this girl, who recognised her life was quite challenging, is that a few years later we saw the results of that mentality. We saw the results. She was on the BBC, and this is what happened.
So when I was 7, I got meningitis and I got quite ill, and so I had to have my arms and legs amputated. So now I'm a quadruple amputee.
Hey guys, so today I thought I'd come back with a makeup video.
If I can show people what I can do, it shows them that you can still do things and that I can still do things, and that I just get on with my life normally rather than being considered disabled, I guess. So if I can be something for someone to look up to, then that's great.
So I'm sure you'd agree that Izzy is a great example of someone who accepts what happened to her in her life with a real aplomb and 2% mentality and determination to bounce back. Don't you agree? What a great example she was. So celebrating sometimes our imperfections and the problems that we sometimes have in a way that what can we learn from these things and can we grow in spite of our difficulties? It is possible. And that's one of the things that I wanted to share with you. That's a version of you that breaks out of the comfort zone. Do you recall that slide we showed in our last session? So number 2. Number 1 is plot twist. Number 2 is gratitude. There's nothing greater that can add to your well-being and your mental wealth than gratitude. That is a single most research finding that comes out of all the positive psychology research that I've analysed and looked at. Gratitude. So how can we display that? Well, it's so easy to get into a complaining spirit, to either be ungrateful for what we have and to find fault with others, to find fault with situations, to find fault with the traffic, Trump, Brexit, all of these other things. But what about things in our lives that are there for us and we sometimes struggle to acknowledge and be grateful for? So because gratitude grows mental wealth, this is an activity I want you to really take some time over. If it's something that you already do, wonderful, do more of it. If it's something you've not given a lot of thought to, then really start doing that now. 9 things that you're glad to have but take for granted. So here's an activity for you. I want you to consider those 9 things in 3 lots of 3. 3 things that you're grateful for about life, your life. 3 things that you're grateful for about work. What are you grateful for about what you're doing with your job? What do you really enjoy about your job? What are you grateful for about it? And finally, 3 things I am grateful for about myself. So what about yourself? What 3 things are you grateful for? Now, if you wish to, pause the video and enjoy reflecting on those 9 things. 3 things, life, work, myself. If you've done that, great. If not, perhaps do it later. Another aspect of gratitude is about building relationships. The biggest factor in developing happiness, some consider, is the quality of the relationships we have. Not how many friends we have on Facebook, who may not be, who just might be electronic friends. However, real, deep down quality relationships. How can you build those? How can you turn them into even more improved quality relationships? Well, here's the second activity I want you to think about that will help you to develop and grow gratitude and mental wealth. I want you to think of two people, a couple of people, relatives, friends in your life. Think of those two people. And then what I want you to do is write down 5 positive things that they each add to your team. So if it's in a team environment, think of 2 colleagues and 5 positive things, a bit like your 5 a day. So what are those wonderful things that member of your team adds to the team that you value so much? Write it down. If it's somebody in your life, write down something about what they've done to improve your well-being and had a massive and positive influence on you. Here's something, when you've written those things down about your 2 colleagues, what do you think would be the best thing you could possibly do with those things that would improve your mental well-being and also theirs? Send them. You've got it. Send it to them. Write them a card and say, this is what you've done that influences me, or these are the qualities I love about you and I appreciate that you bring to this environment that we're working in or living in. So whatever. So those things, that mental wealth activity will build your mental wealth. Number three is, how do we respond when things go badly wrong for us? Well, we learned a little something from Izzy, didn't we? 8-year-old Izzy, who became 14. When she was 14, she'd grown and developed an amazing 2% of resilience. So when things can go badly wrong for us and have a setback, how do we respond to these things? Depends what it is, but how do we respond? Choose your response. Here's a few questions that I've researched into positive psychology, and these questions can really, really assist someone in looking and reflecting on how to deal with the difficulty in their life. So, can you see those? Which of those questions might help you? You don't have to ask all of them, but it could just be number 3. How would the 2% version of me react to that? Above it, how significant will this be in 6 months' time? Is it really, really that, is it, what gravity does it have, in other words? Can I learn something from this? Can anything positive emerge? How bad is it? So those kind of questions can enable you to build resilience, or what we call bouncebackability. Absolutely. Have you ever heard the expression neuroplasticity? Yes, it's the capacity of the brain to learn and develop new ways of thinking that can serve you well. Your brain is a bit like that meadow. Some connections are just not there. Some habits of thinking may not be there. You may have deeply ingrained tracks of negativity, but with an effort of walking a new mental pathway, using some of those tips that I've just shared with you, plot twist, gratitude, choosing our response, 3 of those things will make a massive difference and create new neural pathways, a positive kind, that you want to stay with you for the rest of your 4,000-week journey. Finally, number 4, guess what positive psychology research suggests? Yes, being kind to others and performing random acts of kindness, not just when it's somebody's birthday, just doing something out of the blue, unexpected, even for a total stranger, like buying somebody a coffee, small things like letting somebody in with the traffic, could be a big thing. Small or big, those random acts of kindness can go a long way to building your own sense of well-being and improvement in your positivity. There's my 4 tips. Any good? I hope so. Finally, I just want to ask you to think about this. If you're a really, really busy person and you're working from home, that is a challenge. I'm finding it constantly to be a challenge to work from home and to focus. There is very, very little reflection time. Very little reflection time. So what I want you to do is make an appointment with yourself. What for? Well, maybe you've got no time to reflect. You haven't got that opportunity when you leave work to travel home and to reflect as you're traveling and to think, what could I have done differently today? How did that go? What did I learn, or whatever? What could I do differently tomorrow about that? Well, you may have lost that opportunity. So what can you do? One of the things that you can do to counteract that loss is to make an appointment with yourself. That is it's simple to say, but not easy to do. But I really, really want you to view yourself as another one of your clients or someone that you have to deal with. For example, if a colleague said to you, I need to speak to you today about this, this, and this, at 10 o'clock, we're going to make that call and have a chat with each other. We're going to discuss this. You would do it. You wouldn't say, no, I haven't got time. You would make that time and agree that time, and you would do it. You are that person. You are so important to you. So therefore, make that time. So at the end of the working day, if you can, try to arrange to do that. In other words, to make a reflective time for you. Set it aside, put it on the calendar, put it on your to-do list. Make time for myself. And during that time with yourself, that is when you start to regurgitate and to think and to muse on the day's events and to consider what you've learned, acknowledge perhaps if there was a weakness in the way that you handled something. I like that last one. What do you think about that? Ask yourself, what was good, fantastic, or brilliant today? What have I really, really enjoyed about my work today? Look for the positives. It becomes a habit of thinking. It will improve your effectiveness. Please don't give up. Please don't give up. There will be times when you feel like it, but make a massive effort to do that. And I'm going to leave you with some homework. I really hope you can enter into the spirit of this. Please enter into the spirit of it, and I'll be delighted to read what you share with me. What would I like you to do? What I'd like you to do is project yourself 5 years from now. 5 years from now, when you if you decide to be your average self, your mood hoover self, so describe yourself as a mood hoover, your average version of you. How's your career? How do you feel? Who you're with? How do people describe you? What have you achieved? What's your lifestyle? And do the same again as a 2%er. So if you adopted some of the things we talked about in this session, the Business Unusual session and the Being Brilliant session, choosing to be that upper end version of you more often, more consistently, regularly thinking and behaving like a 2%er version of you, knowing that you can do it, what actually starts to happen to your career? What happens to your feelings? How do people describe you? Wow, that would be an amazing activity. So I'd love you to do that. Project yourself forward. If I really, please write to me with your answers to my address there at the bottom, the email address. I'd love to send one of you How to Be a Wellbeing, Dr. Andy Cope's new book. It's been a pleasure talking to you once again. Build your mental wealth. Stay healthy, of course. Be careful each day. The pandemic is still with us. Look after yourselves and your families. Thank you so much for watching today. All the best.